So this obviously had a lot of build. I think it was Gordy Soley and Bob Caudle on commentary, I think, which is a weird combo.
It
Yeah,
was.
that was not like Sully's good play-by-play, but there just wasn't. There was the color commentary was not as. They didn't provide a whole lot of color. It was just too similar
My
to
problem
Sully's play-by-play.
my problem is Solely. I do not. Solely is the wrong sound for Jim Crockett Promotions. And while I think Bob Caudle is an inferior announcer, he is the voice that I prefer. He is a more familiar voice for the Jim Crockett Promotions surroundings.
Okay.
That's true, but I was never a Bob Caudle fan.
I have a soft spot for him. He's not my favorite, but like he's kind of in that Boyd Pierce territory of it's kind of like watching wrestling with your like uncle or grandfather or something.
Mm.
He's kind of in that mold for me. But it was a weird announcing thing, and they really didn't talk to each other that much. It was just a weird performance. I think they were doing it like, well, no, they would have had to be doing it live if it was closed circuit.
Mm-hmm. It was just it didn't it the thing that they had flow off of each other, but they did not have they just didn't have any color, any zip to their commentary.
No.
It was just so even keeled the whole time.
I mean, it might also depend. We'd probably have to watch the other show to figure out how many drinks in Gordy was at the time.
Okay.
Because he might have been pretty blitzed by this point.
Right.
But so the first thing that stuck out to me, and I had forgotten how bad it was, but oh my god, Gene Kaniski as a referee, just
Oh,
Terrible.
terrible.
So terrible. Actually took away from the match.
Yeah.
very much so.
So
It was as if I'd had a guy reffing one of my matches like that. I don't know how if I could have been as patient as these guys were with him
he was just
before. Yeah, okay. You don't, as a ref, if you're going to break up a pin, you do the count. You make people respect your authority. You don't grab them by the arms and drag them away. Also, it's a cage match. You don't chastise someone and try and stop them from using the cage in a cage match.
I just don't understand how a wrestler, like especially a wrestler that had done it for a long time and was a legend, didn't understand how to referee. I think the problem is he was trying to get himself over.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like the fact that every time he was trying to break stuff up, and he would basically be grabbing the wrestler by the arms. There was at least like 4 or 5 different opportunities where like cheap shots were thrown because he was doing that. He was terrible. He was terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What did he add? Like, what was he supposed? Was he supposed to just add like gravitas to the match because he's a former champion? Was that what they were
I think
going
Gravitas adding a name to the show and kind of like that, we're putting like an ex wrestler in there so that, to keep them in line, so to speak. I don't know.
Someone who can hold it, kind of like Sid Justice being the ref for that WrestleMania match, so that it's not. It's like this guy's not going to get wiped out by these guys if they get mad or something like that.
Yeah. But now I will say I saw this the first time I saw this. I was probably in my early 20s, and I really didn't like it that much. And seeing it again, probably for the first time in a decade, I think the disconnect I had from this match when I was younger is I was in that very like smarky like moves mindset at the time, and now that I've kind of like I'm a little more like mature as a fan, like I really loved just the glacial pace of this match, just how everything they did had such like purpose and like everything was like closely calculated and for maximum impact, and everything was a calculated risk. Like it really feels like a championship match, like where everything is just heightened to like the nth degree.
I probably would have sped it up slightly, but I did like that it was kind of very like methodical. It was done with purpose. Like the moves that they were doing to each other made sense, and it was supposed to. I guess the story they're trying to tell was that it was really more like a war of attrition.
Yeah.
Over the course of like 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah. Matt, I'm kind of with you here. I'm in this weird position where I came, coming out of doing martial arts and then going into wrestling and then I'm in this position where I like if you're going to start with the baby face, like, doing some shine, getting the crowd up and into it. I like for that to be a little bit faster pace. And then when you slow it down, it's when the heel takes a hold of them and just starts grinding them down, which Harley was very good at. And
even he would just grab Flair and chuck him right into the cage.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree that the pace when Harley's in control and what moves they do and that sort of stuff is excellent. That's good, but what's the analogy I'm looking for here? It's like an old compact car. No matter how far you push the accelerator down, it's only going to be going about the same speed. It never varied from that one speed. And so it's, the one of the old locker room jokes I was aware of is, hey, we'll start off slow and taper off from there. And to me, like, it's very good. The psychology's very solid. Everything builds on each other. God, it never even picks up a little bit is the frustrating part for me. I wanted to see it on the comeback. I wanted to see, like, Flair's firing up and coming back, but it's still moving at the same pace.
Yeah, I would have actually had it be a little bit faster. I did like it was deliberate. I did like that it meant something. But yeah, I would have cranked up the speed a little bit.
Yeah,
just for the match, because you're right. Like the comebacks, I felt they were kind of at the same pace, and it's like, well, at least the comeback should be like kind of high energy.
Yeah.
So I mean, I liked it, but
you excite the crowd up, right?
Yeah, Flair was super over as a babyface in this, which is kind of weird to see Flair as a babyface. But I like the match. I've also seen like a ton of wrestling, so I can kind of appreciate the match. But if someone was kind of like just getting into wrestling,
this is not the one I'd show that person.
Yeah, I feel like they would walk away and being like, "Oh, it's boring. It's a boring match."
Yeah. Well, it's okay. My wife, she likes seeing people do impressive stuff. So she likes seeing, the flippy stuff, or she likes seeing the gritty brawl kind of thing. This would not work for her. Because like you said, it keeps the same pace the whole time and everything is very psychologically solid, but we don't get any variation. We don't, and maybe this is just a product of the times. I could see that because there's the 70s and 80s, you're having this transition from an era where I'm not saying they couldn't work, but everyone worked a slower, more deliberate style. And then as you get older, people are starting to move a little faster and they're starting to do a little, you're seeing more impressive stuff done more regularly. Because they did impressive stuff in the old days too, just not as much. They saved it for the big shows, right? And so I'm in this place where I like seeing a faster pace for the baby face because it's exciting. And it's exciting, so it draws me in and it gets me cheering for him, right? Flair fires up, comes back to his feet, and he goes, punch, punch, chop, chop, woo! Hits the rope, shoulder block, something like that. I'm like, okay, I'm firing up, I'm getting into it. But here, Flair's coming up, punch, chop, and then he goes into, he grabs that headlock because he's on the offensive now, so he's going to, and maybe that's just kind of a hallmark of the times, but I'm in this place where I'm like, I want a little more on the gas.
Championship matches in the 70s and 80s were typically slower for the NWA title.
So yeah, okay. There's kind of my point is that it's a product of the time. Not that it's bad, it's just different.
It's supposed to be that, like, it's supposed to be a more deliberate pace to put over, like, the importance of, like, the title and challenging for the title and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I will say one thing that did shock me is how good this footage looked.
That's a really good point. This was really crisp.
Actually, both matches looked... Well, actually, I think the Andre match shocked me for 1979. I know they restored it for that NWA On Demand a couple years ago, but that the Andre match was immaculate. And this was, like, really good, too. This was, like, shockingly good for the time.
This was, like, on par with that Andre Stan Hansen match we watched a while back.
Yeah, it was.
In terms of quality.
Yeah. I like the blood in this.
Oh,
I actually felt it really added a lot to the overall drama of the match.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you there. It's one of those things. It's Ric Flair in the 80s in a title match. He's probably going to bleed. Mm-hmm. But they didn't go for it early. It was, if I remember right, it didn't even happen on the first cage spot. I think it happened on the second.
I think so.
In order to really sell. I'm not sure if that's when Harley winged him into the cage or if he winged him into the post that was holding the cage up. But, that's when Flair comes back and it's flowing. And you're like, oh, man, he really got him in there. And then I'm like, okay, wait. I know how that... But even for that moment to get me to set that aside, it really did add to it.
And I really liked... The blood really worked, too, when they were doing those, like, overhead shots of, like, the figure 4 spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And really, they need to bring back that overhead shot. I really like that for some reason.
Oh, wasn't that like Lucha Underground's signature thing or something?
Maybe.
Is they always had that shot set up?
Well, if Lucha Underground was really like shot like a TV show, that was part of its like appeal too.
Yeah.
But
until you found out about how they treated the people they had on the roster, but
this also had that nice bit like we've talked about in some of these older matches that it had that little bit of grit and grime to it where you weren't quite sure, like, they're cooperating, but there's that tiny little bit of doubt in your mind because everything's not crisp. And, like that, like when he puts the figure 4 on at the end, like it's a little like sloppy by design.
Yeah.
Because, Harley doesn't go into it quite like he should because he's kind of fighting it. And it gives you that, it gives you that tiny little bit of doubt. Like, oh, they're kind of not like, he's kind of not getting that in quite right.
Right. Well, the finish on this with spoilers, but it's like one of 2 times I've ever seen Flair come off the top and not crash and burn. That didn't look super crisp or anything, but it was still good.
Yeah. But this was great. Like I really liked how they came out and like Flair has the pomp and circumstance and Harley just comes out, no music, no glamour, it's just Harley and his belt.
Yeah, that was a big, because I'm sitting there and they're doing the whole thing for Flair and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is Flair. This is what Flair does. And then Harley just walks out and like, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that fits.
And this title change is also kind of significant because this reign kind of leads into Flair, into 85 and 86. Like where like Jim Crockett Promotions just absolutely explodes.
Kind of springboard for that era, right?
But I like this. I think my biggest complaint is if Tommy Young had been the referee instead of Gene Kanitsky, I think it would have been a far better match.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, I would agree.
There's no question. There's absolutely no question. I sat here watching this, and I mentioned earlier, it's like why is the ref for a cage match chastising the guys for using the cage? Because I'm watching this and Harley pitches Flair into the cage and he goes to do it again, and Kanitsky gets in the way and stops him. I said, and I'm sitting there and I said out loud, dumbass, it's a cage match. They're going to use the cage. And my wife's like, don't talk so loud. You wake up the baby. And I'm like, sorry, dumbass. It's a cage match.
It really was awful.
That was just horrendous. Horrendous officiating. That really put a blight on it. Like, it didn't destroy the match, but it sure, when he interjected himself, it brought it down.
This was Gene Knitsky in the match.
That's a paddling. Looking at the window. That's a paddling. Staring at my handles. That's a paddling. Paddling the school canoe. Oh, you better believe that's a paddling.
That's what I felt like that match was.
I appreciate that meme.
I'm going to put the disclaimer on this match if you want to check it out. It's on the network, and this disclaimer goes for the Andre and Harley match, which is on YouTube. These are very old school matches. Like, they are not... The Flair race match has some touches of modernism to them, but Harley and Andre has no, like, modern, like, contrivances to it whatsoever. These are very old school matches, so... They're good matches, but you might be bored by them if you're not used to like old school wrestling.
Yeah.
I've been looking for the right phrase on how to use them, and I don't want to say that it's an old school fan kind of match, but I can't figure out what the right phrase is. This is like if your idea of video games is completely the modern era and going back and trying to play like a really well regarded like NES game or like an Atari 2600 game. Like, I think some of what made them good to people of that time might be lost on you because you just don't have like a good frame of reference to what that era is like. I think the phrase I was looking for is if you're a seasoned fan, this would be a good match for you. If your experience with wrestling spans lots of different eras.
Oh yeah, you'll be fine.
You'll be fine. But if you're like an attitude era forward kind of person, this is not something that's going to trip your trigger.
Yeah, because it's if you want to get into older stuff, I'd say go for some shorter matches and build your way up because these matches are fairly long.
Yeah. You've got to know what you're going into so you know what to expect.